The Temple in Jerusalem. A holy temple was any of a series of structures which were located on the Temple Mount in the Old City of Jerusalem, the current site of the Dome of the Rock. These successive temples stood at this location and functioned as a site of ancient Israelite and later Jewish worship. Etymology. The Hebrew name given in the Hebrew Bible for the building complex is either Beit Yhwh, Beit Elohim, house of God, or simply Beiti, my house, Beitika, your house, etc. The term Hekal, hall, or main building is often translated temple in older English Bibles. In rabbinical literature, the temple is Beit HaMikdash, the sanctified house, and only the temple in Jerusalem is referred to by this name. First temple. The Hebrew Bible says that the first temple was built in 957 BCE by King Solomon, according to the Book of Deuteronomy, as the sole place of Israelite sacrifice. The temple replaced the tabernacle constructed in the Sinai desert under the auspices of Moses, as well as local sanctuaries and altars in the hills. This temple was sacked a few decades later by Shoshenq I, pharaoh of Egypt. Although efforts were made at partial reconstruction, it was only in 835 BCE when Jehoash, king of Judah in the second year of his reign, invested considerable sums in reconstruction, only to have it stripped again for Sennacherib, king of Assyria c. 700 BCE. The first temple was totally destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BCE, when they sacked the city. Second Temple. According to the Book of Ezra, construction of the Second Temple was authorized by Cyrus the Great and began in 538 BCE, after the fall of the Babylonian Empire the year before. It was completed 23 years later, on the third day of Adar, in the sixth year of the reign of Darius the Great, dedicated by the Jewish governor Zerubbabel. Despite the fact that the new temple was not as extravagant or imposing as its predecessor, it still dominated the Jerusalem skyline and remained an important structure throughout the time of Persian suzerainty. The temple narrowly avoided being destroyed again in 332 BCE when the Jews refused to acknowledge the deification of Alexander the Great of Macedonia. Alexander was allegedly turned from his anger at the last minute by astute diplomacy and flattery. After the death of Alexander on the 13th of June 323 BCE, and the dismembering of his empire, the Ptolemies came to rule over Judea and the Temple. Under the Ptolemies, the Jews were given many civil liberties and lived content under the rule. However, when the Ptolemaic army was defeated at Panium by Antiochus III of the Seleucids in 198 BCE, this policy changed. Antiochus wanted to Hellenize the Jews, attempting to introduce the Greek pantheon into the temple. A rebellion ensued and was brutally crushed, but no further action by Antiochus was taken. When Antiochus died in 187 BCE at Luristan, his son Seleucid IV Philopator succeeded him. However, his policies never took effect in Judea, since he was assassinated the year after his ascension. Antiochus IV Epiphanes succeeded his older brother to the Seleucid throne and immediately adopted his father's previous policy of universal Hellenization. The Jews rebelled again and Antiochus, in a rage, retaliated in force. Considering the previous episodes of discontent, the Jews became incensed when the religious observances of Sabbath and circumcision were officially outlawed. When Antiochus erected a statue of Zeus in the temple and Hellenic priests began sacrificing pigs, their anger began to spiral. When a Greek official ordered a Jewish priest to perform a Hellenic sacrifice, the priest killed him. In 167 BCE, the Jews rose up en masse behind Mattathias and his 5 sons to fight and win the freedom from Seleucid authority. Mattathias' son Judas Maccabeus, now called the Hammer, rededicated the temple in 165 BCE, and the Jews celebrate this event to this day as a major part of the festival of Hanukkah. The temple was rededicated under Judas Maccabeus in 164 BCE. During the Roman era, Pompey entered the Holy of Holies in 63 BCE, but left the temple intact. In 54 BCE, Crassus looted the temple treasury, only for him to die the year after at the Battle of Carrhae against Parthia. According to folklore, he was executed by having molten gold poured down his throat. When news of this reached the Jews, they revolted again, only to be put down in 43 BCE. Around 20 BCE, the building was renovated and expanded by Herod the Great, and became known as Herod's Temple. It was destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE during the siege of Jerusalem. During the Bar Kokhba revolt against the Romans in 132–135 CE, Simon Bar Kokhba and Rabbi Akiva wanted to rebuild the temple, but Bar Kokhba's revolt failed and the Jews were banned from Jerusalem by the Roman Empire. The Emperor Julian allowed to have the temple rebuilt, but the Galilee earthquake of 363 ended all attempts ever since. After the Muslim conquest of Jerusalem in the 7th century, Umayyad Caliph Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan ordered the construction of an Islamic shrine, the Dome of the Rock, on the site of the temple. The shrine has stood on the mound since 691 CE. The Alik USA Mosque, from roughly the same period, also stands in the temple courtyard. Recent history. The Temple Mount, along with the entire Old City of Jerusalem, was captured from Jordan by Israel in 1967 during the Six-Day War, allowing Jews once again to pray at the holy site. Jordan had occupied East Jerusalem and the Temple Mount immediately following Israel's declaration of independence on May 14, 1948. Israel officially unified East Jerusalem, including the Temple Mount, with the rest of Jerusalem in 1980 under the Jerusalem Law, though United Nations Security Council Resolution 478 declared the Jerusalem Law to be in violation of international law. The Muslim Waqf, based in Jordan, has administrative control of the Temple Mount. Location. There are 4 theories as to where the temple stood: where the Dome of the Rock is now located, to the north of the Dome of the Rock, to the east of the Dome of the Rock, and to the south of the Temple Mount on Mount Ophel. Physical layout. The Temple of Solomon, a first temple, consisted of 3 main elements: the great or outer court, where that people assembled to worship, the inner court of the priests, and the temple building itself, with the larger Hekal, or holy place, called the Greater House, in 2 Christus 3–5, and the temple, in 1 Kings chapter 6 verse 17, and the smaller inner sanctum, known as the Holy of Holies, Kodesh HaKodeshim. In the case of the last and most elaborate structure, the Herodian Temple, the structure consisted of the wider temple precinct, the restricted temple courts, and the temple building itself. Temple precinct, located on the extended Temple Mount platform, and including the Court of the Gentiles, Court of the Women, or Ezrat Hanashim, Court of the Israelites, reserved for richly pure Jewish men, Court of the Priests, whose relation to the Temple Court is interpreted in different ways by scholars, Temple Court, or Azara, with the brazen laver, the altar of burnt offerings, the place of slaughtering, and the temple building itself. The temple edifice had 3 distinct chambers: temple vestibule, or porch; temple sanctuary, the main part of the building; Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber. According to the Talmud, the women's court was to the east and the main area of the temple to the west. The main area contained the butchering area for the sacrifices and the outer altar on which portions of most offerings were burned. An edifice contained the Ulim, the Hekal, and the Holy of Holies. The sanctuary and the Holy of Holies were separated by a wall in the first temple and by 2 curtains in the second temple. The sanctuary contained the 7-branched candlestick, the table of showbread and the incense altar. The main courtyard had 13 gates. On the south side, beginning with the southwest corner, there were 4 gates: Shah Halion, Shah Hardlek, where wood was brought in; Shah Habichoro, where people with firstborn animal offerings entered; Shah Hamayim, where the water libation entered on Sukkot. On the north side, beginning with the northwest corner, there were 4 gates: Shah Yechonia, where kings of the Davidic line entered when Jeconiah left for the last time to captivity; Shah Hakorban, where priests entered with Kodsai Kodashim offerings; Shah Hanashim, where women entered into the Azara, the main courtyard, to perform offerings; Shah Hashir, where the Levites entered with the musical instruments. On the east side was Shalnikana, between the women's courtyard and the main temple courtyard, which had 2 minor doorways, one on its right and one on its left. On the western wall, which was relatively unimportant, there were 2 gates that did not have any name. The Mishnah lists concentric circles of holiness surrounding the temple: Holy of Holies, sanctuary, vestibule, court of the priests, court of the Israelites, court of the women, temple mount, the walled city of Jerusalem, all the walled cities of the land of Israel, and the borders of the land of Israel. Temple services. The temple was the place where offerings described in the course of the Hebrew Bible were carried out, including daily morning and afternoon offerings and special offerings on Sabbath and Jewish holidays. Levites recited psalms at appropriate moments during the offerings, including the Psalm of the Day, special psalms for the new month, and other occasions, the Hallel during major Jewish holidays, and psalms for special sacrifices such as the Psalm for the Thanksgiving offering. As part of the daily offering, a prayer service was performed in the temple which was used as the basis of the traditional Jewish service recited to this day, including well-known prayers such as the Shema and the priestly blessing. The Mishnah describes it as follows: The superintendent said to them, "Bless one benediction," and they blessed, and read the 10 Commandments and the Shema, and it shall come to pass if you will hearken, and spoke. They pronounced 3 benedictions with the people present, true and firm, and the avodah, accept, Lord our God, the service of your people Israel, and the fire offerings of Israel, and the prayer receive with favor. Blessed is he who receives the service of his people Israel with favor, and the priestly blessing. And on the Sabbath they recited one blessing: May he who causes his name to dwell in this house, cause to dwell among you love and brotherliness, peace and friendship, on behalf of the weekly priestly guard that departed. In the Talmud provides traditional theological reasons for the destruction. Why was the first temple destroyed? Because the 3 cardinal sins were rampant in society: idol worship, licentiousness, and murder. And why then was the second temple, wherein the society was involved in Torah, commandments and acts of kindness, destroyed? Because gratuitous hatred was rampant in society. This teaches you that gratuitous hatred is equal in severity to the 3 cardinal sins: idol worship, licentiousness, and murder. Role in contemporary Jewish services. Part of the traditional Jewish morning service, the part surrounding the Shema prayer, is essentially unchanged from the daily worship service performed in the temple. In addition, the Amidah prayer tradition traditionally replaces the temple's daily Tamid and special occasion Musaf offerings. They are recited during the times the corresponding offerings were performed in the temple. The temple is mentioned extensively in Orthodox services. Conservative Judaism retains mentions of the temple and its restoration, but removes references to the sacrifices. References to sacrifices on holidays are made in the past tense, and petitions for the restoration are removed. Mentions in Orthodox Jewish services include a daily recital of biblical and Talmudic passages related to the korbanot performed in the temple, references to the restoration of the temple and sacrificial worships in the daily Amidah prayer, the central prayer in Judaism, a traditional personal plea for the restoration of the temple at the end of private recitation of the Amidah, a prayer for the restoration of the house of our lives and the Shekinah to dwell among us is recited during the Amidah prayer. Recitation of the Psalm of the Day, the psalm sung by the Levites in the temple for the day during the daily morning service. Numerous psalms sung as part of the ordinary service make extensive references to the temple and temple worship. Recitation of the special Jewish holiday prayers for the restoration of the temple and their offering. During the Musaf services on Jewish holidays, an extensive recitation of the special temple service for Yom Kippur during the service for that holiday. Special services for Sukkot contain extensive references to the special temple service performed on that day. The destruction of the temple is mourned on the Jewish fast day of Tisha B'Av. 3 other minor fasts also mourn events leading to or following the destruction of the temple. There are also mourning practices which are observed at all times, for example, the requirement to leave part of the house unplastered. In other religions, Christianity, the temple is mentioned many times in the New Testament. In these scriptures, Jesus prays there and chases away money changers and other merchants from the courtyard, turning over the tables and accusing them of desecrating a sacred place with secular ways. According to the New Testament Gospels, it was to the temple court that Jesus was brought as a child, to be presented at the temple and to attend festivals. Jerusalem historian Dan Mazur reported in the Jerusalem Christian Review on the numerous archaeological discoveries made at this location by his grandfather, Professor Benjamin Mazur, which included the first-century stairs of ascent, where Jesus and his disciples preached, as well as the mikveh, used by both Christian and Jewish pilgrims. The events of Pentecost, which are recorded in the Book of Acts, also took place at this location, at the area in which Jesus cleanses the temple of the money changers, chasing various commercial traders of doves necessary from the sacrificial rituals away from the sacred precincts. Remarkable findings were uncovered by the elder Mazur, such as a first-century vessel with the Hebrew word korban, meaning sacrifice. It was believed by Benjamin Mazur that inside this vessel, merchants would have stored the sacrifices sold at the temple court. Jesus predicts the destruction of the second temple and allegorically compares his body to a temple that will be torn down and raised up again in 3 days. This idea of the temple as the body of Christ became a rich and multi-layered theme in medieval Christian thought. Islam. The Temple Mount bears significance in Islam as it acted as a sanctuary for many Hebrew prophets. Islamic tradition says that a temple was first built on the Temple Mount by Jacob and later renovated by Solomon, son of David. In addition, it is considered to be the site of Muhammad's night journey and his ascent into heaven, one of the most significant events recounted in the Quran. According to Muslim scholar Sayyid Hossein Nasser, professor of Islamic studies at George Washington University, Jerusalem has the significance as a holy site for Muslims primarily in three ways. First, while in Mecca, Muhammad used the temple in Jerusalem as his first qibla. Then, after Muhammad emigrated from Mecca to Medina, Allah permitted his prophet to turn towards Mecca in prayer 16 months after he arrived. Second, while Muhammad was still living in Mecca, he reports that he took a night journey to Bayt al-Maqdis, which is considered as a very auspicious event in Islam known as Isra. The third factor, says Nasser, is the Muslim belief in the second coming of Christ to Bayt al-Maqdis. Imam Abdul Hadi Palazzi, leader of Italian Muslim Assembly, quotes the Quran to support Judaism's special connection to the Temple Mount. According to Palazzi, the most authoritative Islamic sources affirm the temples. He adds that Jerusalem is sacred to Muslims because of its prior holiness to Jews and its standing as home to the biblical prophets and kings David and Solomon, all of whom he says are sacred figures in Islam. He claims that the Quran expressly recognizes that Jerusalem plays the same role for Jews that Mecca has for Muslims. In his 2007 book, The Fight for Jerusalem, Radical Islam, the West, and the Future of the Holy City, Gold calls assertions that the temple in Jerusalem never existed or was not located on the Mount temple denial. David Hazany has described the phenomenon as a campaign of intellectual erasure, aimed at undermining the Jewish claim to any part of the land, and compared the phenomenon to Holocaust denial. Archaeological evidence. Archaeological excavations have found dozens of ritual immersion or baptismal pools dating to the first temple in this area surrounding the Temple Mount, building the third temple. Ever since the second temple's destruction, a prayer for the construction of a third temple has been a formal and, by some authorities, optional part of the thrice daily Jewish prayer services. However, the question of whether and when to construct the third temple is disputed both within the Jewish community and without. Groups within Judaism argue both for and against construction of a new temple, while the expansion of Abrahamic religion since the 1st century CE has made the issue contentious within Christian and Islamic thought as well. Furthermore, the complicated political status of Jerusalem makes reconstruction difficult. While Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock have been constructed at the traditional physical location of the temple, when the Umayyad Caliph Abdul Malik ibn Marwan built the Dome of the Rock, some reports indicated that the Jews were filled with elation. Some even believed that this Islamic shrine was the third temple. For a century, Jews had full access to this holiest of sites. In 363 CE, the Roman Emperor Julian ordered Alypius of Antioch to rebuild the temple as part of his campaign to strengthen non-Christian religions. The attempt failed, perhaps due to sabotage, an accidental fire, or an earthquake in Galilee. In media, journalistic depiction of the controversies around the Jerusalem temple was presented in the 2010 documentary Lost Temple by Serge Grankin. The film contains interviews with religious and academic authorities involved in the issue. German journalist Dirk Martin Heinzelmann, featured in the film, presents the point of view of Professor Joseph Patrick, stemming from the underground cistern mapping made by Charles William Wilson.